Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ben, and welcome to our webinar, Managing Sickness and Absenteeism this winter. Just letting you know that we will get started in a couple of minutes. Please sit tight, and we will just wait for everybody to enter the session. Okay, it looks like we have enough people who have joined us now, and we can make a start. If you missed the beginning, hello, my name is Ben, and welcome to our webinar, Managing Sickness and Absenteeism this winter, presented by, of course, Citation Group. Before we do a deep dive into the presentation, just a few, I guess, general housekeeping rules. If you do have a question throughout this webinar, please use the Q&A button just at the bottom of your screen, and we will be able to answer them by the end of the presentation. You don't need to wait until the end to type in any question. Just send them out throughout, and we will endeavor to try and answer as many as we possibly can at the end of this webinar. So today, we will be discussing managing sickness and absenteeism this winter. And most importantly, what are the protocols? How should management also approach this? We have quite a few people actually joining us today for this webinar. Given the high attendance, I'm guessing you've come along to this webinar because you've experienced firsthand the difficulties of dealing with maybe short staff during the influx of the sick employees during the winter months, or perhaps you just want to broaden your knowledge when it comes to being prepared for when you are faced with this influx of absenteeism during the winter months. I'm really glad that you've joined us today, and by the time you finish this webinar, you should be able to walk away with some useful information that will help you on your people management journey in your business. Today, our webinar will be presented by Annalise. Annalise is an employment relations and safety consultant at Citation HR. She helps our clients via the HR advice line, providing them with guidance and support on all range of employment-related matters. But a little bit about myself as well. Hi, my name is Ben, and I am a business development coordinator at Citation HR. I have worked closely with businesses to help them uncover any gaps when it does come to regarding their HR, as well as safety processes, and also finding any ways that they might be able to streamline their people management. Okay, so for those who have not attended our webinars in the past, here is a little bit of information about Citation Group. Citation Group, we've been around for 30 years. We've been working to help Kiwis as well as Aussie businesses by providing a complete workplace compliance solution that help create better workplaces. From outsourced HR solutions at Citation HR, as well as safety management systems to ISO certification, Citation Group, we are here to support your business in many ways. If you'd like to learn more about us, I would be pleased to talk to you after today's webinar so we can work together for a bespoke solution for your business. Before we get into the nitty-gritty of today's topic, I will give a brief overview of how we have been helping businesses beyond our webinars. Citation HR is a complete, compliant, and cost-effective solution that help businesses keep up to date with their HR-related obligations. We're here to help streamline people management processes, save you endless hours of your time, and of course, money. Whether you're a small business or a large enterprise, every company needs a solid HR partner that supports and provides them reassurance. One of the beautiful things about the Citation HR service is that we provide a tailored HR solution to your business. But we are here for you 24 hours of the day through our advice line as well, where you are granted access to call one of our advice consultants and be advised on any form of HR related matters. And as consultants, we believe in our advice as well. That's why, as well, our advice line is also underpinned by our advice promise. But we are also more than just consultants. We also have a HR software, which helps streamline your business processes through that software capabilities. And also through that software, you are actually granted access to a large library of HR related resources and our compliance training center. Whatever you need, we are here to help you. Okay, and that is enough of me rambling. Now to today's agenda and what Annalise will be going through with you in this webinar. So first off, she is going to be going through what your rights are as an employer, as well as your obligations in managing ill or injured employees. What is short absence of work? Managing work-related injuries, managing non-related work injuries, and lastly, requesting medical evidence. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I will pass you on to Annalise.
Wonderful. Thank you for that, Ben. Look, at some point, every employer will face the challenge of managing an employee dealing with an injury, a medical condition, or a disability. Now, during these times, it's crucial to understand the legal protections that are in place for these employees so we can manage accordingly. Now, while there are instances where an employee may be unable to continue working due to their condition, mishandling this process of managing or terminating their employment can lead to significant legal claims against the employer. Each case comes with its own set of nuances that can influence the appropriate course of action, and we always recommend seeking professional support, such as our services, so that we can guide you in identifying what the important aspects are of the matter and what that would influence in terms of our course of action. However, this webinar aims to provide you with knowledge and tools to navigate these complex situations effectively and in compliance with the legal requirements, and a little taste of what we do. So, some common questions we face when assisting clients with managing an employee who is absent from work for medical reasons are: what do you do if an employee is absent from work due to illness for days, weeks, or even months? When can you request that employee to give you more detailed medical evidence to help you understand the illness and their capacity for work? What is the process you need to follow in managing such situations? What can direct the employee to attend an independent medical examination? What happens if there is conflicting medical information? What do you do if your employee turns around and says you're bullying for the purposes of harassing them about that illness? And when can you move to terminate the employee's employment on the basis that they cannot fulfill the inherent requirements of their position? So let's begin by outlining your rights in these situations. So employers must not base decisions about an injured employee's capabilities on generalizations or assumptions. It's crucial to obtain input from a treating doctor or an independent expert in this area. As an employer, you are entitled to request information to determine an employee's fitness for work and whether they will be able to return to work in the foreseeable future to perform the inherent requirements of their pre-injury position or pre-illness position. It is essential, however, that employers engage in reasonable management process when requesting and using such information. If an employee refuses to provide consent for the employer to obtain medical information or a medical report, the employer may inform the employee that the situation will be managed as if they do not have a medical condition. If it is known that the employee has a medical condition and they refuse to allow the employer to obtain information, this could justify dismissal, i.e., for their conduct, particularly if there are genuine safety concerns regarding the employee's ability to perform those inherent requirements of the role. It's important to recognize that while employers have certain obligations in managing a sick or injured employee, these obligations have very clear boundaries. For instance, if an employee is unable to fulfill the inherent requirements of the role, despite reasonable adjustments, the employer is not obligated to retain that employee. Moreover, a common workplace issue arises when an employee's medical condition poses a risk to themselves or others. If, after implementing reasonable adjustments, the employee remains unable to perform their essential tasks safely, the employer is not required to continue their employment. This may be, for example, as a machine operator who has been prescribed medicinal drugs for the purposes of their illness. So I'll pass back over to Ben for a short intermission in this session.
All right, thanks very much for that, Annalise, and thank you very much for the insight. So, okay, you're probably all starting to think about some of these issues in your own business, or perhaps you have an existing workplace matter that you need support with. Here's a special offer for you. We're offering everybody today in this call with a 25% off our award-winning HR solution. This is a limited time offer, so now is the perfect opportunity to discuss your business's compliance, understand if there's any glaring risks, and we can share our knowledge with you. We'd love to be able to assist you. So you can simply just scan the QR code that is on your screen right now to claim this offer. And if you're on mobile, you can claim the offer using the link in the chat box below. I will just give everybody maybe a minute or so just to scan that in before I pass it back to Annalise and we continue this. Okay, it seems like we have already received quite a majority of people scanning the QR code. So I will now take it back to Annalise to continue on with this webinar.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ben. Okay, so what is a short absence from work? So, under Section 352 of the Fair Work Act, we see that an employer must not dismiss an employee because the employee is temporarily absent from work because of an illness or injury. So, let's define what exactly does a temporary absence mean. Under Section 3.01 of the Fair Work Regulations, this would be classified as a temporary absence if they're absent for 3 months or more, or the total absences of the employee within a 12-month period have been more than 3 months, whether based on a single illness or injury or separate illnesses or injuries. Now, this employee must not be on paid personal/carers leave for the purposes of this determination. Employers must exercise great caution before deciding to terminate an employee who is temporarily absent but expected to recover or resume fulfilling the inherent requirements of their role. There are many statutory protections designed to preserve the employment status of workers in such circumstances, which we need to remain mindful of. The legal position depends on whether the employee's injury or illness occurred at work. This will directly dictate the course of action that is pursued in the course of these type of situations. So where an employee has been injured at work, state legislation provides additional protections for those absent due to work-related injuries. For instance, if we were operating in New South Wales, Section 248 of the Workers' Compensation Act 1987 prohibits an employer from dismissing an employee on the grounds of being unfit for work due to a work-related injury. This protection extends for 6 months from the time of the employee first becoming unfit for work due to that injury. Furthermore, state legislation mandates that employees who have suffered a work injury must be offered suitable employment, taking into account factors such as the employee's incapacity and medical evidence, the employee's age, education, skills, work experience, any return to work plans, injury management plans, or similar documentation, any occupational rehabilitation services being provided or that have been provided, and which your insurer will assist you with in managing that return to work program from that standpoint. Now, by comparison, federal legislation provides certain protections to all employees who are injured or ill, regardless of whether this is a work related injury. As mentioned, the Fair Work Act provides that an employee is no longer covered by a claim of unfair dismissal in the case that this is no longer classified as a temporary absence. However, while a dismissal may not be prohibited due to the period of absence, it could still constitute an unlawful dismissal under state and federal discrimination legislation or the general protections provisions of the Fair Work Act. A temporary illness may qualify as a disability under discrimination legislation. For example, under the Federal Disability Discrimination Act 1992, it is unlawful to terminate a person's employment due to their disability, irrespective of the length of their absence. However, Sections 21A of the Disability Discrimination Act provides an exemption. It is not unlawful to dismiss an employee if their disability, whether temporary or long term, prevents them from performing the inherent requirements of their role. This conclusion must be drawn from medical evidence, which would be through that use of a medical certificate or some sort of declaration of their current capacity. Employers also must evaluate whether any reasonable adjustments could enable the employee to continue working. If no reasonable adjustments are feasible, or if making such adjustments would impose an unjustifiable hardship to the employer, then Section 21A exemption may be applicable. Additionally, Section 351, subsection 1 of the Fair Work Act prohibits employers from taking any adverse action against employees for unlawful reasons. So, this would be, for example, in the context of this discussion, a physical or mental disability. However, an exemption is provided under the same section, but subsection 2 of the Fair Work Act, which states that the adverse action may be taken if it is lawful under anti discrimination law or if action is due to the inherent requirements of the role, which is where we would lean on that declaration of our medical practitioner to say that this medical condition obstructs their ability to perform the inherent requirements of the role. Consideration must always be paid to whether the employee is covered by the unfair dismissal provisions of the Fair Work Act in addition. So that would be when we're evaluating for large businesses, which would mean that their minimum employment would be that they need to be employed for a period of 6 months or more before making a claim of unfair dismissal. Or for a small business, which would mean that you have less than 15 employees, your period would be a period of 12 months before they can make that claim of unfair dismissal. So while the proper process for terminating is always recommended as a best practice approach, this is particularly vital when there is a legislative obligation to follow such because we're playing with that minimum employment period, which prescribes that ability to make a claim of unfair dismissal. So a final point I would like to discuss with you today is the process of requesting medical evidence and how we may approach such. So often we navigate with clients the process of requesting medical evidence when an employee may turn around and state that the employer is harassing them per se. A decision of the Fair Work Commission has shed some light on these issues. So in the case of Linda and the Royal Children's Hospital, the Fair Work Commission determined that the employer did not engage in bullying or harassment by repeatedly requesting medical information from the employee. Now, the Fair Work Commission also concluded that the employer had valid grounds for terminating her at the end of their employment relationship. So, after 17 days of personal carers leave, the employer requested updated medical information from this employee to support her return to work safely. They provided a letter for her GP outlining the required details. Upon union advice, she did not comply. Subsequently, the employee provided monthly certificates of capacity indicating she was unfit for work due to clinical diagnosis of depression and anxiety secondary to workplace harassment, which reportedly she stated dated back to 5 years prior. In October 2017, 3 months into the employee's period of personal leave, the employer directed her to attend an independent medical examination. Now, the employer warned that a failure to attend such examination may result in disciplinary action. The employee, again on her union advice, chose not to comply. The employee claimed that the direction to attend the independent medical examination exacerbated her stress and mental health issues. 2 months later, the employer lodged an application with the Fair Work Commission to try and resolve the ongoing dispute with the employee regarding her failure to provide further medical information so they could provide those determinations as to what the best course of action was in this situation. Now, following the first conference, the employee's medical practitioner provided to the employer a one-page medical report with very limited information for that employer to work with. The employer again wrote to the employee and requested that she supply them with the requested medical information, or otherwise her employment would be reviewed. The employee again did not comply with this direction. The employer wrote to the employee informing her that they were in the process of reviewing her employment, which may include termination of employment. She was again invited to supply any additional medical evidence that she wished for the employer to take into consideration when forming this final determination. Finally, on the 15th of August 2018, the employer sent a letter of termination to the employee informing her that based on the limited medical information available, it appeared that she was unable to perform the inherent requirements of her role, and as such, her employment was terminated. The employee subsequently filed an unfair dismissal claim, attributing her incapacity to an unsafe work environment created by the employer, which included instances of verbal confrontation, inadequate training, misinformation, and frequent unplanned meetings deemed unreasonable by her. She also claimed that the direction for her to attend an independent medical examination was unreasonable and amounted to bullying and harassment because she was already attending one as part of her work safe claim. So there was a lot to unpack here, a lot of accusations thrown around by the employee, which puts you in a predicament where you feel like you're trying to obtain that information to understand how you can manage the situation, but you're treading on these lines of not wanting to be accused of harassing or bullying an employee. So what exactly do we do in those situations? So, in their finding on this case, the Fair Work Commission noted that the employee had unsatisfactory material to prove that the employer had failed to provide a safe working environment. The employer's communications with the employee were clearly reasonable attempts to obtain information about her health. The commissioner notably stated that it perhaps is understandable that the employee would have an emotional reaction to the respondent's requests for information, but that does not make the respondent's actions unreasonable. In particular, they stated that they did not agree that the various respondent requests for medical information were bullying or harassment. They were simply, as an employer, doing a job to ascertain the medical fitness of an employee. Based on the available evidence, as at the date of termination, the employee did not have the capacity to work, their diagnosis recovery was unknown, and there was no evidence to suggest that any reasonable adjustments would be of material difference in dictating that course of action. The employer therefore had a valid reason for dismissal, and namely, they did not have the capacity to perform those inherent requirements of the role. Further, the employer had afforded this employee procedural fairness when terminating her employment. And considering all of those statements, the Fair Work Commission held that the employer's actions in requesting medical evidence from the employee were reasonable, and the eventual decision to terminate her employment was fair. So, what are some factors that benefited the employer in this case? So, they communicated with the employee in a fair and a transparent manner. They had legitimate basis for requesting further medical information regarding the employee's fitness for work due to her extended and ongoing absence. They sought the additional medical information to fulfill the legal obligations to the employee. When informal requests for medical information were unsuccessful, the employer made a reasonable request for the employee to attend an independent medical examination. They attempted to mediate the dispute through the Fair Work Commission through their dispute process. They notified the employee of the consequences of failing to comply with reasonable and lawful management direction. They ensured procedural fairness throughout the process, which led to the termination of her employment. So finally, in noting those takeaways as to how we may approach a situation which comes with multiple layers of complexity, a lot of allegations are thrown around, what if what happens if we get to a standpoint where that employee does comply with attending an independent medical examination and we find ourselves in a place where we have conflicting evidence from their initial medical provider and our independent medical examination report. So, for example, the employee's treating practitioner indicates that the employee is fit, whilst the independent medical examination indicates that the employee is unfit to perform their duties. Within case law, there is no settled determination as to what is the correct approach here, and it would be assessed on a case by case basis, which is where you give our team a ring so that we can make an assessment with you and work through those problems together as to what the nuances are of the situation. However, to mitigate risk as much as possible, in the event that there is conflicting information between an independent medical examination and a treating practitioner, it's always a good idea to write back to the initial medical practitioner and raise the concerns that there is conflicting information here and whether or not they have any comments or opinions on the other medical information provided. What this demonstrates here is that the employer is not just picking their preferred course of action to get to the outcome that they want, and they actually are following up and clarifying before any determinations are made in these situations. Alrighty, so I am going to pass back over to Ben, who will be looking at some of the questions that have come through during this session.
Thanks very much for that, Annalise. Now, before I do get into the questions, just a reminder again that we are going through a 25% off our HR solutions for everybody that is in this call. Now, this is a limited time offer as well, and I cannot stress 25% off for such a complete and comprehensive HR solution is a once in a lifetime offer. We are here to assist you in all forms of HR related matters. And it all just starts with picking up the phone and giving us a call and having a quick chat to talk through all your HR and work health and safety needs. Without further ado, we will go to the questions that have been asked throughout this webinar. Unfortunately, I think we might be going a bit over schedule now, so we only have time to answer a couple of questions. So the first one, do we as employees have to accept medical certificate? Annalise?
Yeah, look, that is a great question. And it is a question that we often problem solve through with our clients. Now, I think it's first important to break down the fact that as an employee, you have an entitlement to access personal carers leave. In that sense, you cannot take action or obstruct someone's ability to access that type of leave. Now, where our entitlements and authority comes into play is the fact that we have the ability to question the evidence that's provided for that employee to be able to access that type of leave. So, for example, if I'm calling in sick to my workplace tomorrow, my company policy requires a medical certificate for such, and I get my friend to write me up a medical certificate, and it does look clearly fraudulent, and it doesn't look like a true medical certificate. It would be within the company's rights to ask for a second opinion or question that type of medical evidence if they felt as though it didn't satisfy the reasonable person test. Now, what that pertains to is that form of evidence wouldn't satisfy a reasonable person that that person is unfit for work. Now, if the business genuinely is of that stance from an objective standpoint, putting their feelings aside of the fact that it can be extremely annoying when people go on leave, it's obstructive to our operations, it can cause problems when we have somebody who is continually going on leave and there genuinely is reason here to scrutinize that type of evidence. Those are the type of things that we can work towards with you in addressing those type of problems. And it gives grounds to that company to be able to question that type of evidence. But it's important that you're not obstructing their ability to access that leave because it is a legislative entitlement to do so.
Very well said, Annalise. And we have time for just one more question. And this one is an interesting one, linking back to that case study that you mentioned. Can we direct an employee to go to an independent medical examination?
Yeah, look, absolutely. That is a great question again. And I think it is important to note that if we're dealing with a situation like this, an independent medical examination is quite costly for the business. Typically, it is reimbursed by that business or paid for by the business. And in that sense, the business needs to be prepared that that's what's going to result in that type of situation. Now, in the case that we want a employee to attend an independent medical examination if there's a question as to the validity of one treating practitioner's determination of what the condition is. What that falls under the umbrella of is reasonable management direction. Now, failure to follow reasonable and lawful management direction is a different course of action that you may pursue, which may result in disciplinary action for not following such directions. In that sense, what we typically advise in those situations is, as it's within your rights to request someone to go to that type of examination, and it does fall under your direction of reasonable management direction, but that type of reasonable management direction is built into the mechanics of a contract. Now, we have those type of frameworks already built into our custom contracts here, which basically encompass that duty to be abiding by reasonable management direction so that the business can fall back on that in the case that this results in this situation. And what you're doing there is getting really good contracts that are proactive and act as preventative measures if you need to fall back on something like this when you're in a dispute with an employee.
Right. Thank you very much for that, Annalise. Now, apologies, everybody. We are running short on time. If we were not able to answer your question during the webinar today, we will endeavor to reach out to you in the future and talk through that with you individually to help you out in that matter. And of course, to remind you for the third time, we are going through that 25% offer of our HR services. It's a fantastic time to have a discussion with us, pick up the phone, and just talk through what your business may be currently facing or what you might be afraid could be down the line for you. We are always here to help. Now, want to say thank you very much for attending our webinar today. I hope you've enjoyed it, and we hope to see you again in the future.